we researchers, we don't know what's going on. All we can do is ask kids, how many hours a day do you spend? But the companies know exactly who's watching what their mental health, they're the only ones who know what's going on. They designed it for addiction. Some of the trust and safety workers are well motivated. They escalate, they say, hey, we got a problem here. If we put on a button to report creeps, we could stop the creeps. And the leadership, especially Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, routinely ignores it, says, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing anything that reduces engagement.
Hey everyone, today we are jumping into the human mind, issues of morality, the sociality of the species, technological developments that have profoundly impact how we live our lives. And I'm so pleased to have this conversation with Jonathan Haidt, who's the Thomas Cooley Professor of Ethical Leadership at NYU. He's the best-selling author of many books, most recently The Anxious Generation. Perhaps you've read it. I'm so pleased. Jonathan Haidt, thanks for joining us.
Brian Greene, what a pleasure.
Thank you. You know, when many researchers think about what elevated us from a run-of-the-mill species to sort of this place of dominance on planet Earth, many turn to our sociability, our capacity to form groups. Is that where you would place sort of the burden of what allowed us to prevail?
Absolutely. So let's start with the idea of a superorganism. So E.O. Wilson has a wonderful book called Superorganism, and he goes through this amazing jump that some solitary wasps went through when it's when you have a defensible nest that you invest in. At that point, it makes more sense for the babies to sort of grow up there and keep building it. So wasps made that, and you get bees and all the Hymenoptera. Termites did it differently. Naked mole rats did it differently. And what he points out is that whenever you get an ultrasocial species like that, it dominates. It pushes all the solitary ones to the margins. It takes all the best, and they never go extinct. So there's only one species that's a mammal that's truly ultrasocial, and that is the naked mole rats. One queen has all the babies. It's a weird situation for mammals, but they did it. The other is us, and we do it in an entirely different mechanism, which is we are able to unite into infinitely large groups, not based on kinship, not based on blood, but based on shared sacredness, shared sense of history, shared stories. All that stuff binds us together. And the groups that do that best push everyone else to the margins or wipe them out. So I think there's no question but that our world dominating jump was when we moved from social, dogs are social, dolphins are social, to ultra social. And at that point, the die were cast, we were going to dominate the planet.
And is it just, unexplained feature of our evolutionary history that it was this particular mechanism that worked for us? I mean, why is it that shared sacred stories? Why is that the mechanism?
Well, so in my book, The Righteous Mind, which is where I really go into the evolutionary story and the developmental story, and it's really an investigation of why are we moral? What is morality? Why is it different but yet similar? In that book, I point to a specific idea, really amazing idea from Michael Tomasello, who's a developmental psychologist who, he's American, he was working in France, somewhere in North Carolina or Georgia, American affiliate. In any case, Michael Tomasello did these amazing experiments with toddlers, 2 or 3 years old, and chimpanzees, adult, and orangutans. And when he gave them physical tasks, like can you retrieve this thing with a stick, all 3 species were pretty even. They're all able to do some reasoning and solve problems. But when he gave them social situations, like the experimenter is trying to tell you, the toy is under that cup, go there. She looks at it and she points. The kid gets it instantly, knows that we're communicating, and goes for where the thing was hidden. Chimps and orangutans are oblivious. And what he shows is that the key is what he calls shared intentionality. Our ability to jointly, we share a representation of what's going on and what we're trying to do, and then we play off each other and we can do it. And you might, because most people point to language. Most people say, oh, well, language, that's what did it. And of course, language is crucial to the story. But what Tomasello points out is that even language has to have shared intentionality beforehand, because we have to agree that this sound refers to that thing in our world which we care about. And if you think about times, have you ever traveled in a country where you don't speak the language at all?
Of course, yeah.
Are you able to kind of navigate around and use...
Pretty much. There's a shared something that we get.
Exactly, because everybody knows, okay, he doesn't speak, but he's trying to get onto the bus. Oh, no, you need to use this ticket. Like, we can do that. And again, that's what makes us super powerful, because we're not depending on kin. We can unite with strangers. That's the beginning of the story. And then what I add on to Tomasella's story, as someone who studies morality, is the binding mechanism that you see all around the world, which involves synchronous motion. If you move together, you bow together, you circle the sacred object together, you have gods, you have all sorts of things. Religion is surprisingly similar around the world, yet also really different, sort of like language. So that's what you start with: shared intentionality, and you end with shared sacredness and religiosity, and you've got a superorganism.
And so the fact that many of the world's religions speak to other qualities, like how the universe began or what happens to us after we die, is that integrated into your definition of sacred? Like, do you need those qualities to kind of qualify to reach sacredness that will bring us together?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that they're common. I don't think they're necessary or sufficient. What I mean by that is you've got traditional religions before big religions. So before you have agriculture, big societies, big gods, that all starts, Mesopotamia, and, you get the rise of, Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, you get big religions. But before that, for at least 50,000 years and possibly a couple 100,000 years, it's, this tree is sacred to us. And this is where the father, the ancestor came down to earth, or this is where he was buried. And, so you have origin stories. You are trying to make sense of the world. You're not trying to understand it literally so that you can manipulate it. You're trying to understand it symbolically so that you can connect. So I would say I'm a disciple of the great French sociologist Émile Durkheim, who noted that religion is not about the belief in God. It's not trying to explain the world. Religion is best understood as a way of creating a church, a community, a coherent group that will support each other and act together.
And so when you look at the world's religions, would you say that their initial function would better be understood if you interpret them metaphorically than if you interpret them as an attempt to give some literal description of how the world began and how things...
Yes, and when you put it that way, I think it's very clear what the debate is between me and the new atheist, which many of our audience will be too young to even remember what that was. But there was a period, after 9/11, there was a lot of interest in, is Islam different? And then there were people like Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett and Richard Dawkins who wrote books on how stupid religion is or how evil it is. And they were called the new atheists. And I wrote something back then saying, I think you guys have misunderstood religion. You're taking it literally. If you take it literally, it doesn't make any sense. And I myself, I was raised Jewish, but I was an atheist since a year after my bar mitzvah. And I remember thinking, this doesn't make any sense. Like, you couldn't, and then I read the Bible. My God, you read the Hebrew Bible, and there's horrible things that God tells the Jews to do. So I thought, I'm done with all this. Because again, I took it literally. And it's only once I went to graduate school, and then I picked morality as my topic. And then I started reading about the psychology of religion. I read Durkheim. And then it was like, oh my God, this is how we became us. And so yes, interpret it metaphorically, but even more importantly, interpret it functionally. What does it do to be religious? And it's not that religion brings enormous social benefits all over the world. There are all kinds of different religions, some of which can foster violence, and every religion has fostered violence at some point, even Buddhism. But the way to look at it is, what is it doing to groups and communities? And this is where I think America has a real advantage. A lot of people, there was a while in the 20th century, late 20th century, when a lot of people were observing, boy, Europe is like abandoning religion, but America, God, they're so religious. What's wrong with them? Like, why are they so backwards in America? And I forget who it was who pointed out that American religions are just much better than European religions. And what they meant was, in Europe, you generally have, or you certainly had, an established church. And if you have a government-sanctioned church, it does not evolve, or at least it evolves very, very slowly. And it has a monopoly, and it's not very good. And in America, it was a free-for-all. It was a total free market. And so especially among Protestants, but even still, you get people moving between Protestant and Catholic. So especially among Protestant denominations, they're all competing. They have to be welcoming. They have to be exciting. The music has to be beautiful. And so to be a Christian in America for the last 50 or 80 years has just been a much more enticing, positive thing and American versions tend to emphasize service, love your neighbor. A lot of research shows that people in religious communities in America, at least, give more to charity, and not just church charity, not just their church, but more broadly. So again, Durkheim, it brings you into society. It points you more pro-socially. On average, there's plenty of things you can show that are the opposite.
But if the functional role of religion and the metaphorical, poetical aspects of it are ultimately like why they existed, where does the rise of a literalism in religion ultimately come from? Is that just like a misreading?
Yeah.
Or what's the driver behind that?
Yeah. So that's a very interesting question. And an answer pops to mind from an amazing book by James Hunter from 1991, I think it was, called Culture Wars. And of course, that word goes back before 1991, but James Hunter's book really brought it to our attention just as the American culture war was heating up. And what he pointed out was that it used to be Protestants versus Catholics or versus Jews, and then gradually became like Judeo-Christians, and so you sort of keep. But there were splits between religions, and what he shows was happening beginning, I think, in the 70s, especially. Once you have the real progressive shift of the 60s, and you have Supreme Court decisions, and the whole country kind of moves to the left, and the left is kind of winning the culture war. At that point, what you get is you get Jews and Catholics and Protestants who are what he calls Orthodox. They all unite. And the definition of Orthodox, I think, included literalism. That is, in all these religions, these are the ones who took it literally, who believe there is an objective moral truth. God said it, here it is, this is what we do. And of course, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, we don't quite have Sharia, but the idea that God told us what to do, so we must make our civic laws commensurate with the Bible, that is still very much with us today in America. And so here, I think it's a psychological split. What we find is that a really interesting finding from the twin studies in the 1980s and 90s is that what religion you are is chosen by your parents for the most part, but how religious you are is chosen by your genes. And so same thing for politics. Whether you're on the left or right is initially shaped by your family, but where you are in your 30s and 40s is you're more likely to be like an identical twin separated at birth than you are to be like your birth parents.
I mean, so the data really does show that identical twins who've had different upbringings.
Yep. Yeah, because
even if they were raised in different religions, they become Orthodox within their particular faith?
They're more likely to, yes. Wow. More likely than chance, and it's not a tiny effect.
I see.
So, because if you tend to be, organized, conscientious, you like tradition, and that's a brain thing, that's a big 5 trait sort of thing, you're going to gravitate to conservative religions and conservative politics. Whereas if you're very high in openness to experience, and let's have change, oh, we've done this already, let's do something new, oh, a new restaurant? Let's try it. That's a brain thing also. And those sorts of people are more likely to go into progressive politics and to either left-wing religious sects or no religion at all, or the academy. The professors tend to attract that mindset.
Right. And so within this, of course, is an issue of your moral base, the things that you consider to be right or wrong is deeply entwined with these kinds of beliefs. Now, in one or more of your books, correct, I think it's at least one, you had this wonderful metaphor, right, of the elephant and the rider, as if the elephant sort of the emotive, the intuitive understanding of the world, and the rider is like our cognitive sense trying to make sense of it all. And so when it comes to the moral base, that's presumably the elephant is driving it more than we would normally think?
That's right. When I was in graduate school from 1987 to 1992 at the University of Pennsylvania, moral psychology was a big field, but it was all about moral reasoning. And Lawrence Kohlberg was the big figure. And people were studying, how do children reason about morality? And it changes in interesting ways as they go through elementary school, middle school. But I just immediately felt like, yeah, we engage in reasoning, sure, but that's not what drives us. And I grew up with two sisters close in age, and we fought every day, we played every day. And
I had two sisters too, so I know.
Okay, yeah. How far apart?
3 years.
Right,
Yeah,
me too. So it's really intense, and you're really good at giving them reasons, but you made them up. It's all bullshit. So it was clear to me, like, emotion plays a much bigger role. For a while, I was trying to come up with a theory, like, well, is it anger, sympathy? Like, what are the emotions? But I couldn't quite get that to work. And what it really came down to, what I really found by I looked around with Craig Joseph at University of Chicago, working with Richard Schwader there. We looked around at many of the world's moral systems, and we just sort of counted, like, what are the building blocks of morality? It's not emotions, it's intuitions. And so the intuitions, this led to what I've called moral foundations theory. So you think of these as the taste buds of the moral mind. We all have 5 different taste receptors on our tongue because our ancestors ate fruit and meat, and they had to find ripe fruit. So you got sweet and sour meat, you got MSG or glutamate, sort of a umami receptor. So our ancient diet determines our taste. In the same way, our ancient sociality, as tribal creatures who often engage in violent conflict with other groups, our minds have certain sort of building blocks. And so the taste buds of the moral mind, the original theory was 5, but we've added a couple. So it's care, fairness, loyalty, liberty, care, fairness, loyalty, authority, and sanctity or purity. Those 5. There are a couple others like liberty, but those 5 were the first ones we talked about. And every society builds on those. Now, you can see right away what we see as traditional or conservative religions or societies are going to have a lot more on group loyalty and authority and sanctity, and which gives you tradition. It gives you a much more intense religiosity, whereas progressive moralities are going to do much more about care and compassion for the vulnerable victims, and also fairness as equality. And so we came up with that theory looking across nations, but this was like 1995, 6, 7 that we were doing this work. And the American culture war was really heating up. And it became clear right away, like, whoa, wait a second. Like, this perfectly works for left and right in America. It doesn't work today. Today, the left is not liberal, the right is not conservative. But back then, you could see sort of liberal conservative differences. So that's been my general approach to morality.
And so those 5 taste buds of the moral mind, as you describe it, each one of them you can delineate the role it played in the ancestral past? I mean, there's a reason in the historical record. That's
Absolutely.
all quite clear.
Oh yeah, so care is the easiest. We're mammals. We know a lot about how the attachment system works. It's ancient. It's the same in chimpanzees and dogs. And part of it is an extreme sensitivity to neotenous features. And we want to care for them. And that's why
to keep us looking young.
That's right. So like my dog, I have the most adorable dog in the world. She's half toy poodle, half coton de Tulier. She looks like a teddy bear who came to life. She looked like that when she was a puppy.
And you just love her.
I know, it's crazy. I spend so much, like I'm so busy, but I'm like, I have to care for her. Like, no, I can't go to the office today. I can't leave her alone here. So, and she's 3 years old now. But she was bred to trigger those receptors in me. She was bred to be cute. And so the idea that seeing someone else hurting a child or clubbing a baby seal, boy, does that hit us. Okay, now that hits conservatives too. Conservatives don't like to see child abuse either. But the difference is that on the left, you don't make your morality yourself. On the left, the morality that is constructed as a story with reference, all sorts of things, is built especially on the care foundation. Whereas on the right, they have care in their personal lives, but right-wing morality isn't about care and compassion. It's much more about guarding the borders against external threats. It's about traditions, honoring the ancestors, doing your duty, things like that. And so you get this split within every religion. In fact, in Judaism, there's a brilliant article, what's his name, Halevi. He talks about Passover Jews and is it Purim Jews? It's this, the story of the Passover is we were slaves once, and we need to welcome and fight for freedom, and that's the progressive side. But the Purim Jews are about the betrayal of, I forget the whole story. I'm a terrible Jew, but
me too. Okay. Don't quiz me.
Okay, I was going to turn to you, but I thought, but no, this guy's a physicist. He's not going to know.
Exactly.
So, but anyway, the point is, you actually need the two.
Yeah.
That's the conclusion I came to in The Righteous Mind. You can never get a perfect society. The closest you can get, I think, is one in which you have a force pushing for change, and that's going to come from the left. That's the progressive. You have a force pushing for change, but you have to have another force on the other side saying, no, not so fast. Wait, let's not, and that's the conservatives. And if they're engaged well, then you get the best possible society. And boy, are they not engaged now in our country.
Yeah, so it sort of takes us to some of the work that you've been doing recently, which is, in the early days of digital communication, internet, ultimately social media, the promise and the hope was this was going to be a way of sort of bringing the world together, allowing for a certain kind of connection that couldn't be articulated or established in the ordinary real world, but you have this virtual world will be able to have it. And it's not that that has completely failed in that way, but it certainly hasn't quite lived up to that. And you've been focusing upon some of the deleterious impacts of this kind of broad socialization, if you will. Just take us through what you've been focused on.
So there's two main areas I've been looking at. One is what has digital technology done to democracy? And then the other is what has it done to childhood, especially adolescence and puberty? So let's start with the politics and society one. So there was a really amazing book in the late 1990s by Robert Wright called Non-Zero. And he draws on E.O. Wilson and evolution, and it's like every time there's a big increase in connectivity, like roads or mail service or telegraph, telephone, every time you get a big step up in productivity, creativity, more people come online, more people's ideas, progress. So he writes this book around 1999, I think it was, and Bill Clinton talks about it, and the internet is new, and we're all techno-optimists.
Yeah.
Because past experience was that if we now can connect everybody for free, this is going to be amazing. And we thought, this is going to be the best friend of democracy. Good luck, China, keeping out the internet. You can never do that, we thought. So that's where we were in the late 90s. And then social media comes out. It's amazing. And it's not toxic. It's just like, here's my page. Oh, let me go to yours. There's no news feed, no algorithms. And then the iPhone comes out. And it's amazing. And now we can do all these things all the time. And that's amazing. And then the Arab Spring happens, 2011, I think it begins. And that's amazing. And Facebook is bringing down dictators. So we're all techno-optimists all the way up through 2012, 2013. And then things start to turn south. That was actually the high point of democracy in human history. There are organizations that measured the degree to which nations are democratic, like VDEM, I think, in Scandinavia. And they can graph it out. And you see a big jump up in the 90s and another jump in the 2000s. And 2011, 2012, go democracy. It's been all downhill since then. We first noticed in the US, on the left, people saw, I thought social media was our friend. Obama won in part because of social media, but now Trump won because of Twitter. Wait, what's going on? And then the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which again was the right is using this for nefarious purposes. So the left turns against social media first in the late 2010s. And Jean Twenge publishes her article, Have Smartphones Destroyed a Generation, 2017. So now we also are getting the beginning of concern, like, wait, what's happening to our kids? And then COVID comes and we all get confused. And we all have to rely on these devices. And then COVID leaves and our kids are doing worse and our democracies are doing worse. And so I think what's happened was that connectivity in general has been a good thing to share ideas. But if democracy is a conversation, and that's what Noah Yuval Harari says, if we think about it's a conversation, it's going to depend on the environment. So democracy in Athens was literally a conversation in the agora from the people who lived nearby. And in the 20th century, it was a conversation carried out through newspapers and other things that were gatekeepers and editors, and that's how the conversation went. And that was the high point of liberal democracy on planet Earth, was all the European and American liberal democracies, late 20th century. But if democracy is a conversation, and that conversation moves on to Twitter and Facebook, and which you get comments have been toxic for a long time. 2014, Facebook introduces threaded comments, I think it was called, where like if Obama posts something, you can't just say, go back to Kenya, you can't just say something horrible there. and then there's 1,000 other comments. You say something horrible there, and then other people can reply to your comment. So now every nobody, every troll can get in on a fight under a thread that millions of people are reading. And now all hell breaks loose. Now it's just conflict all the time. If the medium is the message, to some extent, as Marshall McLuhan said, then when the medium becomes, let's all fight over stupid things, that's our democracy.
And so you really think that we can kind of pinpoint it to these seemingly small changes to the way that these social media apps were organized?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been reading a lot of Neil Postman, the great 20th century theorist, and he goes into detail about how did television change us? And it's not, you don't get lost in like what show was saying. Note that everything becomes entertainment. And so now our politics becomes entertainment. And he points out news is entertainment, and there's music, and why is there music on the news? And so technology has very far-reaching ramifications that it's really fun to read these writings. And now let's turn to our age, the digital age. So when Facebook was just your page, like MySpace, like here's your page, totally non-toxic. You can find great bands, they can post there, all that stuff is good. Facebook develops the news feed. Now, if it's news about your friends, that could be good, but there are all kinds of problems that could happen. Then it becomes not so much about your friends, it's, can you believe what George W. Bush just did? And people pile onto that. And so once you get comments about news and politics, now it gets a lot more toxic. You get a lot more virality, and people are going crazy for virality. You have a chance to be famous. You have a chance to get recognition. So it's the news feed, it's the like button, and the retweet button. Talk about virality. You know, many people remember from COVID. What was it? Was it R0 or not? Well, there was a coefficient.
Yes, the spread of the virus.
Yeah. So if the coefficient is 0.99,
right, it'll go
over
down.
Time it'll go down. Right. But if it's 0.11,
1.1.
If it's 1.1, it'll go up.
Yeah.
And so if you take the virality that was possible on email in the 80s and 90s, okay, maybe that was the coefficient of like 1.2. Like you could get things going viral. And then you get the early social media, maybe that's like 1.5. And then you drop in the retweet button and you literally like, oh, here's something, click, goes out to my 100 people, some of whom have 10,000 followers, click, 1 million people are reached. So it's kind of like, imagine we have a long experience fighting forest fires on this planet and we kind of have them under control. And then God comes down and says, let's make the Earth's atmosphere 80% oxygen. 20% isn't, let's make it 80. Let's see what happens. Boom, everything goes up in flames. That's what I believe happened between 2009, when you get the like and the retweet buttons, and 2014, when you get the threaded comments. By 2015, it's just explosive. And at that point, it becomes, I think, the biggest enemy of democracy and friend of authoritarianism. The technology is helping China be a more effective authoritarian nation, and it's making it much harder for democracies to be vibrant democracies.
And so if we go to the level of the individual, you similarly see a parallel there. Is that driven as much by small changes in the platforms, or is it the device? I mean, what was it? I think it was 2007 that I saw the first iPhone, something like that.
Yeah.
And so that, compare that to a flip phone, the way we engage with that is radically different, of course. So is that the driver at the level of the individual?
So you have to, so it's a little complicated. You have to parse it out. Apple's business model is not to make you use the phone as much as possible. Apple is not trying to addict you. But all of the social media platforms that's their business model. You know, we pay money to Apple for a phone. We don't pay anything to Facebook and Twitter and all those companies. We're the product. They sell our attention to advertisers. They want to get as much of it as possible. Anna Lemke, an addiction researcher at Stanford, says the smartphone is the hypodermic needle delivering digital dopamine to us 24/7. And so imagine if the iPhone is, hypodermic needles everywhere. Everywhere you go, there are hypodermic needles. We're all carrying them. And the App Store is anyone can pop something into your hypodermic needle and put it into your bloodstream. So I don't blame Apple per se, but they made possible for companies to get to us and our kids with push notifications and all kinds of tricks to get us to stay on their platform rather than the competitors. That's when everything goes to hell. Teens' mental health was fine from the 90s through 2011. No sign of a up or down, just moves up and down a bit. And boom, 2012, 2013, it takes off like a hockey stick.
I mean, I was at your talk in Aspen this summer.
Oh, right.
And you showed data or described data that was really eye-opening and shocking. I mean, my son, who's 20, was sitting next to me. And he's, like all kids, social media user. And after your talk, he said, "Oh my God," and he immediately deleted, these apps.
TikTok? What did he delete?
All of it.
Amazing. But has he gone back on?
No.
Wow. Love it.
But he then tried to convince my daughter, who's now 18, and she took TikTok off her phone. It lasted a day. She had to bring it back.
Yeah.
And the reason was not that she wanted it, she hates it, but all her friends are on it.
Exactly. And that is the very definition of a collective action problem, a common idea in the social sciences, where you might choose which action to take, but you can't choose really the best option for you because of what everyone else is doing, which actually would make that very costly. So you have to do what everyone else is doing. So it's the commons dilemma, if everybody grazes their sheep on the public green and some people put out 2, before you know it, the thing is dead and we're all worse off. The really great thing about Gen Z is they're not in denial. I have yet to meet a single member of Gen Z who says, no, social media is actually great. No, it's good for us. They know what's happening, just like your daughter. Like, I know this is
There's something paradoxical, isn't there, a little bit? Maybe not to you. I mean, to the outsider, I'm like, if everybody knows that it's bad, and we haven't even gone into it, but the data that you described, the curves for anxiety and depression
and self-harm and suicide,
they all skyrocket.
That's right.
in
At
what,
the same time,
2014?
Around 2013, 2014, and this is true across the Western world. It's not just the US. That's what blew me away.
And was there something in that year, or was it just the collective effect from 2007 and the apps?
So it's 2 things. So in 2010, teens have flip phones.
In 2010, still flip phones. Okay.
Yeah, the iPhone came out in 2007, but it wasn't widespread.
Okay.
It was more expensive. There weren't a lot of apps.
Sure.
And no social media was on smartphone yet. So 2010, they have flip phones. So if you're born in 1995, you're the last year of the millennials. In 2012, so 2012 is the key year because that's the year when it pivots, where now most Americans have a smartphone, not an older phone, and teens are either ahead of that or behind, but they're close. Around 2012 is where most people are now on a smartphone. Also 2012 is when Facebook buys Instagram. Instagram comes out in 2010, photographer website, not a lot of people on it. 2012 is the year that everybody attends to it, all the girls go on it. That's 2012. 2010 also is the first front-facing camera. So by 2012, teens no longer have a flip phone. They have a smartphone with a front-facing camera and Instagram. And that's exactly when the numbers begin to rise, and they rise sharpest for girls. For girls, it's a very sharp hockey stick. For boys, it's a little more curved.
Do you know why? Or?
Yeah, I think, I don't know for sure, but our guess is that because for boys, the story is different. It's not primarily social media. It's just the whole online, the video games, the porn, the gambling, and the social media. And a lot of the videos they're watching are violence. They're people being punched and killed and horrible, horrible things. So that comes in a bit more gradually. Also, the video games, us older folk, we think of video games as a game that you play. And that's what they used to be, because you would buy a video game and then it's yours and then you play it. That's not what they are now. Roblox, especially, there are games in there, it's true, but they're more like online funhouse, weird, Times Square circa 1974.
I remember.
Places where children are hanging out.
Yeah.
I just read Roblox took down dozens and dozens of Charlie Cook assassination games. So just in the last 3 days, hundreds of people have created games that kids can play to reenact the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So it is a completely sick environment. It is completely inappropriate for children. All of these systems immerse children into conversation with adult men who are anonymous, some of whom want sex, some want money. It's completely insane that this is what boyhood has become, and girlhood. So is it something about the phone? Well, the phone makes it all possible, all the time. But it's really the apps that insist on pushing children into conversation with adult men. It's always adult men. There's not a lot of adult women predators. So that, I think, there are so many harms that began to happen to children around 2012, 2013.
And you're sure this is not just a correlation? I mean,
Yes.
I read this, and I'd like to give you a chance to respond to it. There was this review in Nature, where the point that was made, I'm sure you unfortunately took a look at it, was that, hey, correlation is not causation. Are we sure there's really a link? And now, as I understand it, you've now hit back hard by doing exhaustive studies. And so what has that revealed?
So, right. So, of course, this has been the long question. It's a question in video game research, too. It's true that boys who watch more violent video games end up committing more violence. That's a true correlation. But might it be because boys who are prone to psychopathy, so it's taken decades to resolve this, and it's still not resolved. And same thing with social media. Everyone agrees girls who spend a lot of time on social media are 2 or 3 times more depressed than those who don't, but maybe they're different girls. And there are ways that scientists have of addressing this. And you look at multiple lines of evidence. The clearest is experiments. Now, the experiment we need to do is we take 10,000 kids at age 8 and we give them all this stuff and we let them go through puberty, and we take 10,000 and we don't let them do that. Of course, we could never do that experiment.
Restrict them, no iPhone or whatever.
That would be if we could do that experiment, that would settle the matter. Like whatever that shows, that's it. We know. But we can't do that. What we do is these little proxy things where we say, how about we'll get 200 college students to reduce their use of Facebook for a week, and we'll see, do they get happier? And the answer is that for the first few days they don't. And so some studies only go for a few days, and they find
withdrawal or something?
Exactly. They find withdrawal effects. And other studies that go for longer than a week, almost always find a reduction in depression and anxiety. And so those are little toy experiments, but they do show causality. And then there are longitudinal studies. Audra said that when there are longitudinal studies, they always show that first comes more depression, then comes more social media use, but she's wrong. There's only one study we found that shows that, and there's all kinds of problems with it. Most of the studies show forward predictability. It doesn't prove causation. But first, what we find over time is that first kids, if they increase in their social media use, at the next measurement time, there's an increase in depression. So we've got the experiments, we've got the longitudinal studies. There are a few quasi-experiments, like when high-speed internet comes to different parts of Canada or Spain or Italy, what the scientists track, like what happens to admissions to psychiatric wards. And especially for girls, once it comes in, because then you can be consuming videos and photos much more quickly, girls are more likely to check into psychiatric wards.
And it's not, the obvious question is, could it be that with high-speed internet, you're exposed to more videos that say, hey, if you're not feeling well, you should really check in with somebody who could help you. It's not just being encouraged to go. No, because if that was the case, you'd expect the absolute numbers to go down of behavior. But since self-harm goes shooting up so sharply, I do not believe that it's just that, girls who were going to be depressed are now seeking help. No, girls are much more sensitive to what other girls are feeling and doing compared to boys. And so when everyone gets online, girls sharing their anxiety and being rewarded for it. The more extreme you are, the more support you get. The message is, the more extreme you are, the more support you'll get. So there's so many mechanisms by which social media really hits girls hard and even harder than boys. But just to return to the evidence, if this was a legal case, if there was a case where a woman said she'd been assaulted by 3 men, and she knows the 3 men, and she says, here are their names, and she points at it, they did it. And if there were eyewitnesses who said, yeah, we saw it happen, they did it. And if the 3 men had exchanged text messages and social media posts about that they were going to mug this woman, and then they did mug it, and the prosecutor brings in screenshots and says, look, they say they did it. And if you're in the jury, what do you think? Do you think you'd convict them? Yeah, it sounds convincing.
Sounds pretty convincing. Well, that's where we are with social media and harm. So we have eyewitness testimony, like your children, or like your son. When you survey Gen Z, they don't like it. And they say, this is hurting us. And they overwhelmingly say it's hurting their generation. About a third of them say it's hurting me personally. So we have eyewitness, we have direct identification by the victims. It's very hard to find a member of Gen Z who will defend them. We have eyewitness testimony, so we have surveys of parents, teachers, We're getting all kinds of testimony from pediatricians. Even the police are weighing in to say that social media is behind a lot of the crime we're seeing. So the people who are working with kids, they see it. And because almost every state, at least 30 or 35 state attorneys general at least, are suing these three companies, Meta, Snap, and TikTok, also YouTube, but the big ones are Meta, Snap, and TikTok. Because there's so many lawsuits, in the process of discovery, they're able to bring out all kinds of reports, internal studies. We researchers, we don't know what's going on. All we can do is ask kids, how many hours a day do you spend? But the companies know exactly who's watching what their mental health, they're the only ones who know what's going on. They've all commissioned it, or especially Meta, they've commissioned internal research, and they suppressed it, they hide it, but it came out in discovery. They know exactly what is happening. They designed it for addiction. They talk, and some of the trust and safety workers are well motivated. They escalate. They say, hey, we got a problem here. If we put on a button to report creeps, we could stop the creeps. And the leadership, especially Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, routinely ignores it, says, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing anything that reduces engagement. So this is equivalent, and there's so much else. Snapchat streaks, when they were introduced, there's quotes from email. One Snapchat employee, looking at the data, what are streaks doing? He says, wow, we should put in more addicting features like this. This was their goal. They set it up front. They study it while they're doing it. They know they're hurting children at an industrial scale. We're not talking just a few thousand here and there. We're talking tens of millions just in the US and more globally.
Jesus. I mean, you've also used the language rewiring.
Yeah.
Is that metaphorical? I mean, I mean, to what extent, if you were able, I know it's not realistic, but if you got kids off of these apps, do they recover? I mean, do they?
Depends on the age. So there are sensitive periods in human development.
Plasticity?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the brain is very plastic, especially in the first 5 years. And so, but that's especially like developing like language and walking and things like that. So there's a period of early, very high plasticity and very rapid growth. But the brain reaches about 90% of its full size by age 6, 5 or 6. And beyond that, it's not growth. It's not that it's getting bigger. It's that you actually have too many neurons. And what's happening is as the child does certain things, the neurons that are used to do that, they are reinforced, they myelinate over time, they connect new synapses. And the ones that aren't really used, they actually die. So it's a pruning away. It's almost like if it's like a block of marble, you're going to prune away the stuff that you don't need. And so that's happening throughout childhood, but the peak years of rewiring are puberty. Puberty is a period of very rapid brain plasticity. And you're converting from the child form of a brain, which is very flexible but not as efficient, to the adult form, which is locked into a particular culture. That's why if you learn a language before age 12, you'll have no accent. If you start at 14, you'll never lose your accent because your brain is no longer able to take in a new language. So it's this period of puberty, which is so, so important. And in traditional societies, that's when the child is taken away from the parents and socialized by other people of their sex. The girls are taken away by another woman to learn the rights of womanhood. The boys are taken away by other men, not the father, to learn the rights of manhood. And the adults guide them through puberty, puberty, puberty. What do? We say, here's an iPad when you're 2, entertain yourself, I'm busy, I'm checking my, here's a computer, here's a smartphone, I'm busy. And at first they're watching little videos and they're playing simple games. By the time they're 12, they're talking with strangers in online communities like Discord. They're watching videos of assassinations over and over again. God knows what percentage of kids have seen the Charlie Kirk video with him shooting out of the neck. You can't stop that now. And so what we've done is we said, how about we'll take the greatest period of brain rewiring, where your identity really gets solidified, and we'll turn it over to weirdos on the internet, on TikTok and Discord. We'll turn over to them to socialize our kids. And then we're surprised that our boys aren't turning into men. We're surprised that they're not going to college, they're not getting jobs, they're sitting in the basement, they're committing mass shootings. I can't point directly like this caused this, but one thing we know for sure about young men is that they feel that their lives don't matter, and we can trace that out precisely. There was a question on a survey given since the 1970s to high school seniors. One of the questions is, I feel that my life is useless. And about 9% of high school senior boys, and here it's boys and girls similar, from the 90s through 2010, 2011, it's about around 9%. And then what happens? Boom, 2012 goes shooting up, more than doubles in the next 5 or 7 years. So we know that boys who are raised in this shifting environment of weirdness can't put down roots, can't develop a coherent personality. They feel that their lives are useless because actually they are useless. Our society doesn't give them a way to become useful.
Where do you think even more recent digital developments like artificial intelligence are going to take this? I mean, things that all of us have read, but even just today on the Daily, I don't know if you listen to the Daily New York Times, there was this story which I'd already heard of, this teenager who befriended chat and got really close and wanted his parents to know that he was suicidal, but chat said, no, leave it between us, I'm your friend. That's right. And then the child is dead. That's right. And so this is even a more aggressive digital tool that can insert itself in ways that we never imagined possible. How is this going to amplify the kinds of things that you're talking about?
It's going to make things much, much worse. And that's why I'm so focused on creating a national and global understanding that children need to go through a developmental process, and technology often disrupts that process, and we have to have age limits, we have to have protections for kids until we know that this stuff is safe. And so far it looks like this stuff is incredibly dangerous. What's that phrase? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We didn't know that social media was so bad for kids in 2012 when they were all getting on. We didn't know. We know now. And it's really hard to rip it out because it's so embedded. And we're about to make exactly the same mistake, except a much bigger mistake with AI friends. Think about it this way. One of the most important things kids need to learn that they're not learning from social media is social skills. They don't spend much time with friends. And we can plot this. Time with friends used to be 2.5 hours a day for American teens. Once they get their smartphones, it drops. It's down by more than 50%. And even when they're with their friends, they're still on their phones. Yeah, sure. So we've already separated them from human contact to a large extent. And this is distorting their development, especially for the boys. Boys are known to have very poor social skills, very difficult with eye contact. So kids are very lonely, especially boys. They're very lonely. What's the cure? Mark Zuckerberg said in an interview a couple months ago, he said, I heard a study that on average people wish they had about 15 friends, but in fact, on average, they have only 2 or 3. So I think there's a role where our chatbots could fill that need. Okay, this is completely insane. AI, we don't even the companies don't know how it works. They don't know how to train it to not promote suicide. They have to just try to retrain the neural network on different input. So, the analogy I use is, suppose intelligent aliens landed tomorrow on Earth, and at first they appear useful, and they can do some things for us. So today is Wednesday. So suppose they land tomorrow, Thursday. On Friday, would we say, hey kids, go run off with these intelligent aliens. They'll teach you stuff. It'll probably be okay. No, especially once the aliens start killing some kids. Once they've killed 5 or 10 kids, we might say, maybe we shouldn't let you develop sexual relationships with chatbots, because that's what is happening. It's happening to adults at a mass scale. I'm reluctant to tell people over 18 what to do, but my God, I don't want these companies pushing products on our children that are known to be harmful to children.
Is there a chance, this is not a devil's advocate, I completely agree with you.
Please, give me devil's advocate.
But I'm just, is there a chance that this is just a transition period? That, 10, 15, 5, whatever years from now, we'll sort of look back. And this was sort of giving birth to a digital paradise. And we just had to go through this awful, awful period where maybe a whole generation suffers because of it. I just want to give you one example. And this is not, again, pushback. I completely agree. It's just an interesting thought. I've been working on a physics project with a number of colleagues. In fact, one of those a colleague here down at NYU, Massimo Parati. And we got a kind of interesting result after, a number of months of work. And I said to myself, if I was to go to chat and try to get it to get this result, how hard would it be for me to do that? And so I treated chat as if it were a graduate student.
Okay.
And I kind of gave it various prompts. And within a half hour, got there. And now, of course, you could say I already knew the answer because I'd already done the work and so forth. But still, with a human graduate student, it would be really hard.
Take months and months, years.
And I was really blown away with the capacity and the power. You know, everybody has their own story of their mind being blown by the capacity of these systems.
That's right.
But could it be that there's an emotional version of this that is just somehow waiting to be shaped, and we just need to sort of get there so that these systems are deeply human-like in their emotional capacity? And so if a kid is saying, I want my parents to know that I'm suicidal, the system just responds as a normal human being would and says, you know, so is this just a bad period or what?
What you lay out is a theoretical possibility. It is the most hopeful possibility. In theory, the digital technology should be able to give us the best democracy we've ever had. There's no question that AI is going to unleash extraordinary material productivity and prosperity. And there could be just an adjustment period. Okay, that's a possibility. But here's what I think is likely to happen. We're going to have a period of economic prosperity and abundance and sociological chaos and collapse. Our democracy is in huge trouble. And all of these technologies seem to be just speeding it up, you know, more oxygen for the fire. So I don't know that we'll make it through to that promised land. Secondly, nobody really knows what to do to contain AI because of or slow it down, because of the collective action problem. If Anthropic slows down, then OpenAI will get ahead. If American companies slow down, then China will get ahead. So everyone is going full speed, no safety precautions, lots of money spent to influence Congress. We saw them all up there on the dais with President Trump at the inauguration. There seems to be no practical way to slow this down or guide it. But if we were to get to that promised land, it would require us to say, okay, we've just invented nuclear fission. We've just invented the atom bomb. Now, how about everyone makes atom bombs in their garage? Like, that would be the end of the world. But that's kind of where we're going with AI. So,
well, I guess the difference with that analogy being, it was hard to build a nuclear bomb. So it took concerted efforts of government. That's sort of the level of input that you needed. But here, it's not hard to make use of these systems and to leverage them. You know, so we began this conversation with sociality. The key to our prevailing on planet Earth. Then we have these tools that in principle bring the world together because all you need is a device and you can plug in to any conversation sort of anywhere in the world. But it isn't going in a direction that suggests an elevation of the species, rather a destruction of the species. Right. So look, I know this is completely unfair, but I know you've given it thought. What do we do?
Yeah. Well, here I think we can return. You raised the issue before of what if we take religion as metaphor, as instructive metaphor. And the ancients are full of, the ancients had the idea of, generally, of the wheel of fortune. You may be high now, but just wait, you will be brought low. You may be low now, but just wait, you'll be brought high. And so you find that in a lot of ancient traditions. And so there are stories, so of course the Tower of Babel is one that really speaks to me about what social media has done. You know, humans have just been destroyed, Noah's flood, everyone's dead except for people on the ark, but they're repopulating, they're growing, they're building a city, they're building a tower. My God, here we go, humanity. And they were all united. And God says, roughly a quote, you know, and look, they are united, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And he says, let us go down and confound their language so that they may not understand one another. And he goes down, and now humans are scattered, they can't communicate, they're powerless. So there's this sort of up and down. And you have the story of Icarus, who, you know, was warned, you know, his father makes the wing, says, don't fly too close to the water or they'll get down, you know, don't fly too close to the sun or it'll melt, but we fly too close to the sun. I think that's what we're doing. We are the most amazing species ever to live on this earth. I think ants are pretty good second to us. And our technological prowess allowed us to dominate the world, create the greatest societies that have ever lived. Nick Kristof has a column every December saying last year was the best time ever to be a human being in terms of world poverty, life expectancy, net. So we're up, up, up. We're flying very close to the sun. My fear is that AI will be the sun. AI will be the thing that changes everything so radically that we have some kind of collapse. To be clear, no one can predict the future. Work by Phil Tetlock and others. Experts are terrible at predicting what's going to happen in the future. I'm an expert. I'm giving you predictions. I'm saying if these trends continue, it's likely to be very, very bad. But all kinds of things are going to happen that I have no idea. So we could get to that promised land. Right now, I don't see how, but we could get there.
What do you say to people who answer the issue that you raised, that if one group slows down, the other one takes over, and so on? You know, the most optimistic view of this, which I don't think is realistic, has been, look, we're the good guys, okay? And if the good guys, you know, stay ahead, then ultimately we'll be able to build tools that will police the negative and bad uses of this. But then you look at the companies that we're referring to, and they're the very ones who suppress the data that you describe when it comes to social media and so forth.
And they're making,
So is there a policy? Is there, who do you even appeal to? If you can't appeal to the very makers of things, you have to regulate in some way, but how do you do that?
I don't see a way. I don't see a way. And the reason is because while the Europeans are good at regulation, they're kind of out of the game, in part because they regulate so much. They're a lot less dynamic than the US. So that's a problem. In the US, we no longer have a functioning Congress. We no longer have a function, you know, it's always corrupt in the sense of campaign contributions. But now it really is incapable of doing anything difficult. Congress can't even pass the Kids Online Safety Act, which has complete bipartisan support in both chambers, but Meta is able to stop it with, by its influence on the leadership of the House. So Congress is useless. Congress is not going to get us out of this. States are trying to do things, but that's not really going to change things. I don't really see a way to stop AI from continuing on this course. And my biggest fear is that AI began as, hey, do you want to know everything? Wow, yes. But the thing is, everybody gets to know everything. Okay, maybe that's good, maybe not. But as we move into the era of agents, where it's not just like plan my trip to Mexico, it's, okay, do it, make all the arrangements. And then it could become, I really hate Bob Smith. Go find out his weaknesses. Look at his social media, look at his bank records. How could we destroy him? Go do it. And that would be the equivalent of saying, hey, we invented nuclear fission. Let's make it so cheap and easy that everyone has it. So I think we're in for an era of chaos as AI becomes a tool that everybody can use.
And there will be an arms race in there. No doubt there'll be services. How do you protect yourself against and building one that can fight the other?
Exactly. So that's those ingredients for chaos, that you have such rapid change, an arms race, escalating problems, scams. So it's going to be, the future years are going to be very, very difficult.
All right, so I have to ask you one final question.
Okay.
What are you optimistic about then?
Yeah.
Is there something? Is there a silver lining here?
There is, in that, I'm generally of the view that we're not able to do anything anymore. We're so paralyzed by our polarization, our political dysfunction. But what gives me hope is that when my book came out, when The Anxious Generation came out in 2024 in March, within the first few months, mothers around the world began to organize. Mothers were ready to go on this. Mothers everywhere were worried about this, much more than fathers. They created organizations. There were already a bunch of mother-led organizations. They all read the book. Every book club read the book. And the book advocates now, get together, do collective action. Push your school to go phone free. Agree with each other you're not going to give your kids a smartphone till age 14 and social media till 16. So I laid out 4 norms that if we do them together, we break out of the collective action trap. And I can't believe how fast it's happening. So here are the 4 norms, and they're all in progress. No smartphone before high school, no social media before 16, and there we need a law, not just a norm. Phone-free schools for the whole school day, not just class. And far more free play and independence in the real world. If we do those 4 things, we roll back the phone-based childhood, and we restore a functioning, happy, flourishing human childhood in which kids will come out normal, capable, not depressed, not suicidal.
Are you optimistic
that
can really happen?
It is happening. It's happening all around us. In the last year, 39 states have passed laws restricting phones in schools. 19 did the right thing and made it the full day. The other 19 or so made it just during class, which doesn't really work because then everyone's on their phone between classes and you still have all the drama. But 19 states have gone fully phone free, including New York State. And it's working magnificently. The teachers love it. The kids actually like it after a couple of weeks because they say, it's really fun at lunch. We're talking, we're playing. It's not just everyone on their
And you
phone.
think, obviously, anything in the right direction is great. But if then the kid after school spends 5 hours on the phone, will the phone-free day be wiped out in terms of its utilitarian effect?
Right, but here's what's happening is once the kids are off for the whole day, they're developing habits of not being on. And now if you pair it with more experience in the world and you start saying to 3rd, 4th, 5th graders, get together. Here's 5 families in our neighborhood. Go around between the houses. Go down and get whatever you want. Go play outside. They're not on their phones. So we are seeing a renaissance of childhood. It's driven by mothers. It's been amazing to watch. Oh, and governors. Governors have been incredible, male and female. Female governors, I think, maybe were a little faster on it. Like Governor Huckabee in Arkansas was really one of the first to really go big on this. Governor Hochul in New York has been amazing. So governors have done wonderfully on this, and it's completely bipartisan. This is like the one issue that Americans it's totally bipartisan because we all have kids. So you asked what gives me hope. This does. And if we can win on this, if we can roll back the phone-based childhood, then maybe we could deal with the AI threat. We could at least say, how about no chatbots for children until we know they're safe, which we never will. But if we can't do this, if we can't get 9-year-olds off of Instagram and TikTok, then I think there's really no hope for us. AI is going to take over everything, and human childhood and human life as we know it will not be recognizable.
Well, I'm going to roll back to 3 sentences back where it was the optimistic possibility, and let's just hope that that's where things go. Thanks so much for this conversation,
Brian,
Jonathan.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.